As I said, it's fantastic to see some of you returning who were here with us yesterday. So welcome back. And to those that are joining us new today, hello. I hope you'll really enjoy the second day of the SMACC Global Summit 2025 Foundations. So yesterday was all about understanding the landscape. We went over the basics. We covered the issue, some of the data, some of the fantastic work that's already been done on the issue, and highlighted ongoing challenges. We also talked about how SMACC can support your work. And today we're going to explore 5 key dimensions of the issue. So digging deeper, hearing from experts in the field. Today is for everybody. NGOs, platforms, law enforcement, media, the public, whoever is with us in this space and wants to help end animal cruelty online. We're hoping to reflect together on how these dimensions connect to your work. So my name's Nicola and I'm the lead coordinator of the AFA Social Media Animal Cruelty Coalition. Before we get stuck in, I just want to take a moment to cover some important housekeeping points. Please make sure to turn off your camera during the presentations. And this is because there are some people that may be joining us from areas with a weaker internet connection. And we want to, keeping your cameras off can improve their streaming experience. We also request that you change your name to the one that you're registered with and ideally put your organisation or your business on that as well, so we can see who's with us in the room today. And if you have any questions at all at any time throughout the session, please place them in the chat box. Our AFA team are on hand, they're collecting those and we'll be able to present them to our panel after our break later today. And I just want to give a reminder that slides will be available and also the recordings will be available on our YouTube. So there will be the chance for you to access these. So I have to include a warning because some of the images and the topics addressed today can be distressing. In today's session, next slide, please, we will be hearing from our experts covering the human-animal abuse link, legislation and policy, working with law enforcement, working with some social media platforms, and using social media for good. After a short break, we'll be coming back together for our reflection and discussion part of the day with a Q&A and a quick reflection task for everyone joining today. Next slide, please. So, for those new joining us today, I'm just going to quickly go over who we are. The Asia for Animals Coalition is not only the largest animal advocacy and protection network in Asia, but by membership, we're also the largest animal protection network in the world. We're composed of 27 core members, representing a diverse array of animal protection and advocacy organisations, large and small, all focused on helping animals in Asia. In addition to these, we have more than 400 member organisations in our free-to-join network, which is absolutely amazing. And at our core, AFA is about uniting our voices for the animals of Asia. We help organisations collaborate, we provide a platform to share resources, knowledge and experience, and we're a central point of information for networking and collaboration. As we all know, the movement to help animals is stronger when we're united. And by working together, we can be more efficient and have a bigger, better impact. So AFA has a number of working groups and programmes, and these cover different forms of animal protection issues. As you can see, these range from our policy coalition through to our disaster resilience coalition, our farmed animal coalition, and of course, the social media animal cruelty coalition. Next slide, please. I just want to briefly show once again our wonderful SMACC members. we have now 40 members organizations, which is just incredible from where we were a few years ago. And all of these organizations bring different strengths, different expertise into the coalition and work together and independently to advance the cause and to achieve our goal of ending animal cruelty content online. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you our approach. So just very briefly, SMACC organises our work into 4 key areas. First of all, working with the public to raise awareness and to equip them with the tools and knowledge they need to be able to take action when they see content online. We, of course, want to work proactively and positively with platforms to support them, to give them information, and to see them make changes, improvements in policy and moderation. As a coalition, of course, we're here to support NGOs with the ones in our membership, but also beyond, so that you can strengthen your work. And finally, policy. Yesterday, we heard how crucial it was that we change law to support this issue, and we want to utilise this as much as possible. So reflecting on yesterday, it was really great to see how engaged everyone was and just how many questions we received from our panel. That level of curiosity shows a lot about the size and depth of this problem. Online animal cruelty touches and intersects with other harms, law and policy. It relies on us understanding tech and platform design, which is something that most of us may not have ever encountered in our lives before. It involves the public, creators, platforms, law enforcement, and many more stakeholders. It's clear that it's no small issue. So that's why today is designed to dig a little deeper into some of these different dimensions. And we're delighted to hear from the first of many experts you'll meet across SMACC summits now and in the future, each exploring these dimensions of the problem. And hopefully you can spot where your strength fits. These quick-fire presentations are the approach of the Foundation's event, short, focused starting points that you can carry back to your work. As I said, no one organisation, business, government or person can do it all. So think to yourself, which dimension could I best place myself? So do you have a strong base in law? So you could explore making legal change in your country against online abuse. Perhaps you're an organisation looking progressively at the links between human and animal abuse and looking at how you can utilise this in the fight against online animal cruelty content. Or perhaps your strongest contribution could be identifying a platform contact in your country and bringing them into the conversation with SMACC. That would be really valuable. Maybe if you are a platform, could you make contact with SMACC and discuss making improvements in your policy for animals? Or maybe your strength is media. You're a journalist, or you're one of great organisations who really lean into press and storytelling. You know you best, and you can specialise where you can be strongest. And remember, you don't have to do everything. You can have your role, and then you can let the SMACC Coalition support you in the rest. Next slide, please, where I'm going to show you where SMACC comes in just to reiterate why we're here. We're about bringing people together and strengthening their work. So beyond sharing information like today, we want to support you. And here are just some of the resources that we have. We have data and reports that you could use in your advocacy with the public or when speaking to lawmakers, or as a platform, you can learn about the issue. For NGOs, we have supporter care FAQs and public awareness resources like how to report to platforms, and an array of social media assets and press materials. We have talking points, we're developing policy templates, and of course, one of our major strengths is that we can connect you with other organisations and experts. And this is the link to our NGO toolkit, which is something that we're really going to develop in the next 12 months. So we're going to close today's session with 3 brief reflection questions. First of all, what is your main takeaway from these 2 days? Second, what support do you need from SMACC? And all ideas are welcome. And three, what else do you want to see at the next SMACC Global Summit? So have these in mind across the session today and think about what you need to move forward. Hopefully we have what you need, but we also want to keep developing what we do. So please do give us your insights. Next slide, please. So that's the frame for day 2. Let's dig deeper, find our strengths and coordinate so we don't duplicate work, but work in unison for animals. I'm now going to hand over to our moderator who will guide us through the session. Our moderator today is Ambarasi Bhupal, who has served in the animal protection scene for the past 20 years and recently stepped down as a co-CEO of Acres in Singapore, where she oversaw humane education programs, fundraising, crime investigations, and government engagements. Her interests include systems level changes with an increasing focus on animal welfare in the food industry, empowering individuals on ways to help animals directly, and addressing the root causes through education and policy level changes. A fantastic moderator for today's session. Over to you, Ambu.
Thank you so much, Nicola, and to the SMACC team for the very warm welcome, and also for this very comprehensive introduction to today's very exciting session. So hi everyone, and welcome everyone to our exciting session today. And we have amazing speakers with very valuable insights coming in today. Next slide. So we have Associate Professor Rebecca Wong, City University of Hong Kong, Executive Director of the Taiwan SPCA, Connie Chiang, Vice President Animal Rescue Team, Humane World for Animals International, Adam Parascondola, SMACC Coordinator Vinaya Tipi, and Melody Kwan, Hong Kong-based content creator and Mellow Cat podcast host. So let me introduce our first speaker, Professor Rebecca Wong. Professor Rebecca Wong is an associate professor in the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the City University of Hong Kong. She has published in peer-reviewed journals in the criminology discipline, including British Journal of Criminology, Journal of Criminology, Trends in Organized Crime, Aggression and Violent Behavior, and Deviant Behavior. Her book, The Illegal Wildlife Trade in China, Understanding Distribution Networks, received the Distinguished Book Award from the Asian Criminological Society. Rebecca holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Sociology from the University of Oxford. She is also an Associate Fellow of the Extra Legal Governance Institute at the University of Oxford. In collaboration with the Netherlands Institute for the Study of Crime and Law Enforcement, she was awarded a visiting professorship by the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences. So tonight, Rebecca will be talking about the human-animal abuse link. And welcome, Rebecca. We look forward to hearing your insights. Over to you.
Great, thank you for the very kind introduction. I believe I will keep time on my phone, and I believe, should I share my screen or?
No, it's okay, Rebecca. We'll be sharing your
Okay, great.
presentation.
So
Just
can you
give us
please
a
flag
moment.
up the?
Yeah.
Just give us a moment. We'll definitely share your presentation.
Okay, well, great. Well, before we start, thank you so much for having me. I am indeed an associate professor in criminology based in City U, Hong Kong, where I am currently right now speaking from. So my expertise is actually on organized crime and wildlife trade. So years ago, when I did my PhD on the tiger parts trade, and I went across China and parts of Tibet talking to criminal networks that supply these tiger parts. I also did a couple of research papers on the ivory trade, fish mail, Totaba fish mail, and I have now switched I'm still working on wildlife trade, but I have switched my focus to animals closer to home in Hong Kong, which is in the form of mercy release, which I will cover in the coming slides. Right, so thank you for having me. So can you please move on to the next slide? All right, so just a little icebreaker. Do you know who these three men are? Does anyone know? Again, what do they have in common? Right, so yes. Yes, serial killers, absolutely. Right, so all these three men you see on the screen has their own Netflix documentary for very, very wrong reason. All of them are serial killers. They are in the sense serial killers by definition, they have killed more than three people with a cooling off period in between, and they do not do it for money. Right? There's something psychologically driven behind their MO and why they kill. Okay, so if you are interested, do go on Netflix. Crime documentary, these three men will come up for sure. Now, so what else do they have in common apart from the fact they're serial killers? They have a vivid history of animal abuse as documented by the police investigation. Right, so can you please move on to the next slide? Right, so theoretically, this is what we call the graduation hypothesis, right? So animal abuse behavior or aggression towards animals starts from a very young age, and you gradually, not everyone, but some people gradually progress into violence and aggression towards other human being, right? So not everyone, but some people will do. And in that part of population, some of them some of them would have inflict harm on human being, right? And in most serious cases, murder, as the three men you just saw in the first slide, right? So why is such? They have lack of empathy, they cannot control themselves, they have desires to control vulnerable beings, in a sense, animals. Right, study shows a clear linkage between animal abuse and domestic violence, child abuse, and even murder. They graduate in their use of violence, they become more aggressive with time, they experiment with other forms of killing, they normalize their use of violence and inflict harm and aggression on human beings. Right, can you please move on to the next one? Right. So why in particular domestic violence, it's also very prevalent in this discussion. The abuse of family pets, including acts of force, bestiality, has been documented in studies on domestic violence. Right. So perpetrators, not just men, women as well, they use pets as a power and control. Right. So if you control the power to harm the animal, you can control your spouse or your children, or you manipulate them into doing acts that they do not want to do. 52% of shelter women reported that they are worried for their pets because it remained with their abusers. So in a sense, the pet become a tool to control and manipulate family members and their victims. Can we please? Right, so clear cases of animal abuse, I think very little room for argument. Dog fighting, dog farming, puppy mills, wildlife poaching, poaching of protected species, rare species. So please move on to the next one. Now, what I want to really emphasize, it's something that is ambiguous. Okay, so in my lectures, I try to drive to students in the study of crime. Not everything is black and white. Okay, most crime, there is always an exception. Now, here in this chat room, many of us, and I suspect all of us, are very passionate about animal welfare, and we love animals to an extent. Right, but some animal abuse behavior is not necessarily abuse in the eyes of the perpetrator, of the culture, or the society in which you're in. Neglectful care, sports hunting, trophy hunting is legalized in some African country. Harsh discipline, you can see them in zoos and circus and entertainment, movie, pest control. So you ask yourself, the pest control, are you trying to manage the population of pests, or you're actually causing long-term suffering? You have a collateral damage of spraying so much pesticide around parks, right? So please, next slide. Right, so this social construction, I have 4 minutes, I'll be as quick as I can. The animal abuse is often perceived as a lesser crime, right? We like animals. We don't want animals to be harmed, right? But some people, they don't share the sentiment. They do not agree with us. It's perceived as a lesser harm. I have had so many people coming up to me. Why am I studying about wildlife trafficking when I could have studied something like human trafficking or woman trafficking? Are they not as important or more important? Right? So there's this notion of speciesism that overtakes the importance of animal welfare. Speciesisms in the sense that we human beings are superior, right? Because we're more intelligent, we have a higher intellect ability, So therefore, it's always us, us, us. This is very egocentric, right? And I do not agree with this 100%. The label of abuse is not a fixed term and vary across age, gender, culture, making it very difficult to distinguish certain behavior. So for example, I say to my student, buying a dog from a pet shop instead of adopting is this animal abuse, right? And I tell them about the harm, some of the harmful behavior that these pet shops or these dog farms or cat farm could inflict on their pets, right? So why don't you go and adopt a cat or a dog, right? Could you not have done something to have tried to stop this, right? So next slide, I'll be as quick. So egocentric is, as you see on the screen, the human being on top. Ecocentric, where we are part of the ecosystem. So I show this to my student in my lectures, and I simply ask them a very simple question. If you think human beings are superior, can you survive for 2 days in the desert without your phone? Absolutely not, right? Most of us couldn't. We don't have the survival skills. So in a sense, it is because of the context we human beings have designed for us that we are thriving. We cannot overlook that the fact that we are not superior if we put ourselves in other contexts. But sadly, unfortunately, this is not mainstream thinking. This is not how many people think. So, sorry, in the very last, can you go to the next slide as well? Right. Just to quickly conclude, I mentioned animal abuse is a social construct. It is in some societies or some population interpreted as not as harmful. It is bad, right? But it's not that bad, right? So in a term, we have something called awful yet lawful, right? It's a very awful behavior, but it's lawful. Now, I have a very good example, and it's something that I've studied for quite some time in Hong Kong. Do you know what mercy release is? Yes, does anyone know what mercy release is? I have 1 minute. Right, so
No.
releasing of what captive animals into the wild. If it is done properly, release mission, which I've been on in Hong Kong, scientifically assessed, and the people that is working with these animals are professionally trained, yes, then it is okay because you are bringing them back to the natural habitat. But mercy release, extra 1 minute. Okay, I get 3 minutes. Sorry. So mercy release in the sense where you're pouring fishes and turtles into the ocean with absolutely no consideration of what harm you're bringing to the environment, whether they're invasive species, and the volume of animals you're dumping into the ocean is, in my opinion, absolutely not good for the environment. And it is also animal abuse. Now, sorry, do I have 3 minutes or just one?
You have 3 minutes,
Yes,
Professor.
great. Okay, so I can share more about so are we all familiar with mercy release, right? In the name of compassion, people would buy captive animals and they would release them back into the wild. So previously, before the bird flu, before the bird flu, they were releasing birds. Okay, but now because of the bird flu, people are a bit scared. They start releasing fishes and turtles. Well, if you ever been on one of these missions, so you would see that it's actually very scientifically illy regarded because firstly the volume, secondly the species of the animals, and a lot of the times these animals are released into the ocean injured. Okay, and I've also seen that once the fish is released into the ocean, the birds that are preying in the vicinity will just come and pick them off the ocean. So the birds gets eaten, right, once they hit water. Now, so is this animal abuse? Yes. Animal abuse, correct? Correct. I think we're on the same page. It's absolutely animal abuse. It is, in my opinion, is pollution, right? Because I've been on mercy release trips where I've seen people putting I've seen people after releasing the fish and the turtles, throwing other items into the ocean. Okay, and they're not animals. They're not even dead animals. They are biscuits and milk. Okay, and I go up and ask them, why do you do it? Why are you throwing milk and biscuits into the ocean? And they would tell me, oh, because I want to feed the fish that we've just released. Okay, now they justify it, they rationalize this act of belief on the fact that they think they're actually doing a good. So this is a problem with animal abuse, right? Mercy release is animal abuse, in my opinion. But yet in many places, at least in Hong Kong, it is not regulated. Okay, now, but it could also apply to other acts of aggression towards animal. Since we're given, so sorry, we're discussing animal abuse in the context of social media. I have seen people that has took photos of animal abuse and they have put it on their social media profile and they have framed it in the sense that they are very giving, they're very compassionate. Okay, so I asked these normally ladies, I asked them, why would you go to a mercy release trip, full makeup, right, looking very, very beautiful and attractive, and then take pictures of you putting the fish into the ocean? And then their reply would be, oh, I'm doing it for social media because if I post a picture as such, I'm going to get a lot of like, and potentially I could tell them I could attract a husband or boyfriend because they think I'm very charitable. Okay, so my experience with online platform and animal abuse is minimal, but in the context, so I'm much happy to share more. But I'm aware I have to stop for time. Okay, and I think my time is up. Yes, it's my time.
Yeah, yes, Prof. Rebecca.
Okay, great,
Unfortunately, your
great.
time is
Okay,
up.
I have yapped on to great. Thank you.
Thank
So look forward to your questions and any discussion in the end.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for this very insightful presentation and also showing the proven, very clear linkage between human and animal abuse. I hope it gives our audience, listeners, fellow animal advocates, think about ways that you can already use these insights in advocating for animal protection policies. And I like how you pointed out on what doesn't seem like an obvious abuse, which is very relevant to the online animal cruelty topics that we're talking about. So thank you so much once again. And our next speaker we have is Connie Chiang. Connie co-founded the Taiwan SPCA in 2009, has been the executive director since 2010. She leads the organization in helping animals by focusing on cruelty investigations, advocacy campaigns, lobbying, animal rehoming, and animal welfare education. She has been a committee member for the Ministry of Agriculture's Animal Protection Advisory Committee and is currently an animal welfare policy advisor for the Taipei City government. She currently sits on animal welfare advisory committees for Taichung City and New Taipei City. She has been a member of the Ministry of Agriculture's Committee for the Supervision of Animal Scientific Application Institutions since 2018. Connie has conducted inspections and evaluations of public and private zoos on behalf of different city governments and has led the Taiwan SPCA team in closing down several illegal puppy mills across Taiwan. So today, Connie will be talking about legislation and online animal cruelty. Welcome, Connie. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ambu, for the introduction. Let me share my screen. So to begin, I just want to thank the AFA team for this opportunity to speak on this issue that I personally care greatly about. So today I'll be sharing with you some of our experiences here in Taiwan in pushing for legal and policy change to try to stop animal cruelty online. So to begin, just a brief introduction. So in Taiwan, our Animal Protection Act was only enacted in 1998. So this is less than 30 years ago, but it has been amended close to 20 times. And we attribute this to an increase in the level of concern for animals, both from the public and I believe from policymakers as well. So in 2010, an amendment was made, and this is relevant to what we're talking about today. So in 2010, there was the addition of Article 27-1, which I copied onto my slide. So as you can see, it directly stipulates that the act to disseminate, broadcast, or sell text, picture, audio, video recording that violates Article 6 of our APA. And Article 6 pertains to animal abuse, animal cruelty, and Article 10, which prohibits certain acts on animals, such as animal fighting, or Clause 12.1, which prohibits the killing of animals for certain situations, such as for food or for science. So a violation of this article actually comes with a penalty that may include a jail sentence and a fine. And although we were not involved with the amendment in 2010, as the Taiwan SPCA, we were only founded in 2009. We only had the capacity to really start working on policy and lobbying starting in 2014. So currently we work on a range of issues, legal policies for zoos, animal testing, pet ownership, wildlife issues, and only for the past 2 years, focusing on online animal cruelty as well. Okay, so although we were not involved with the 2010 amendments, I think it's important that we can learn from the past and understand what the legislative rationale was or the explanation was for the amendment at the time, right? So, you can access historical records online, and by doing so, we can see that there were three main justifications written in the bill as the explanation. So one, legislators feared that mass media could spread animal cruelty. So they feared that it could also lead to more and more copycats. And second, it also mentions that the USA also proposed a law in 1999 to try to regulate online animal cruelty content. Although this was overturned a year later in the US, but this did lead to the Animal Crush Video Prohibition Act and now the PACT, right? Third, they reference that an existing law that prohibits the dissemination of obscene materials that was already a part of our criminal code, right? So in conclusion, we can see what resonated with policymakers at the time, which was the increase of animal cruelty through media, right? And also laws in other countries, international trends. And they also looked at what our other laws already prohibited. So since 2010 in Taiwan, it has been illegal to disseminate animal cruelty content. However, there are several reasons why we believe an amendment to the APA is still much needed regarding this issue. So one, certainly, there have been an increase of cruelty cases that we are seeing online that gets reported to us as well. And second, we found that it's actually very, very difficult to try to catch the actual perpetrators. So as you can imagine, like sometimes, well, many times, like the information that we can gather online is very, very limited. And both the police and government authorities here have told us that certain media companies do not offer any help to law enforcement regarding animal abuse content. And third, social media companies, they are doing just too little too slowly, right? It seems that the only thing they ask people to do is to report the content with a promise that it may be taken down, which I don't think is enough. And so in 2022, Taiwan SPCA, we joined SMACC. And we also learned that SMACC is trying very hard to work with these social media companies. And I think that's very important. But we also know that, behind the scenes it's often very difficult to get these companies to even respond to meeting requests or respond to emails. So it really further amplifies my belief that we need something better in the law. And I just want to mention, although every case is important because if every animal is important, it does take a lot of time to investigate a single case. And we may not always be successful. I also think, raising public awareness is very, very important. But I do believe a legal reform is what it takes to see considerable change for the long term. So, in Taiwan, currently our law only punishes individuals, right, who abuse animals and or spread it online. So, we believe that it's time we push for a legal shift so that social media companies be held accountable, right? They are the platform providers, so I mean, it only makes sense, right? They should be moderating their services so that it is safe for everybody and does not facilitate crime, right? And furthermore, I believe that it should be required by law that these companies must work with law enforcement when necessary, right? Instead of, I mean, what they're doing now is basically obstructing investigations, right? And the good news is that after lobbying efforts, so several legislators here in Taiwan and our Ministry of Agriculture have now proposed amendments to our APA. So they want to add new clauses to require social media companies to actively remove content, right, instead of relying on public reports, and also to provide necessary information in certain situations, which will include animal cruelty. So to conclude my very quick presentation, just some key takeaways, I think, especially for NGOs. First, if you don't already do so, especially if you're a smaller organization, I do encourage everyone to start building relationships with policymakers. Certainly when we first started, it felt like a very daunting task, but I think you just have to start somewhere. Um, and I always remind, like, even my own staff, like politicians, legislators, they're elected to represent the people, right? They should reflect public opinion. So to put it bluntly, they work for us, for the people. So really don't be afraid. And certainly don't put all your eggs in one basket. So like for us, we try to visit or pay visits to as many legislators as we can. Call their office, introduce yourself, and just simply ask for a meeting. And I think the more politicians you can get a meeting with, the more chance you have, right? And second, I think is also very important is to try to gain support from government authorities, right? And to try to know what they're thinking. If they don't oppose what you are proposing, it is much easier to get something passed, right? In Parliament, policymakers will ask relevant authorities for their opinion on amendments to the law. And third, of course, use research data to back up your claims. So we use SMACC's reports during our legislator meetings, and it was very convincing to them. And, I could just tell from their expressions, right? So you need to know what you're talking about. And I believe that really practice is so important because sometimes you may only get that 30-minute meeting with the legislator. They're very busy. So, when you go in there, get to your point and use photos and videos, I think is very helpful to drive the point across.
Connie, so sorry to interrupt. You have 1 minute left.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And fourth, I think understand what is happening internationally is very, very important. So join SMACC. And also, I think working with other groups in your country is also very important. For example, a lot of times we arrange meetings with legislators along with sometimes up to 5 to 6 NGOs. Politicians are more likely to reject one group than to reject 5 or 6 NGOs, right? So work together. And final 2 points, of course, try to make the issue known, right? Press releases, public awareness campaigns, petitions, protests. Protests work very well in Taiwan. But whichever way, try to get at least some media attention, media coverage. We know political parties do media monitoring to see what is being discussed, or have a high level of public attention. And finally, really look for windows of opportunity, right? For example, you could meet with legislators not just on one issue, but you could package it with other issues that may interest them as well. And always understand that timing is everything. For example, we knew that the Ministry of Agriculture was proposing a big revision to our Animal Protection Act. So this is the perfect time, right? Because we know legislators will be more keen to propose amendments as well, because they know it will most likely be scheduled for committee if the relevant authorities are working on revisions already, right? Or if something happens in the news, right, that is relevant to your issue, perfect time to approach policymakers and give your suggestions, right? As that is the time they will be most willing to listen. Okay, so thank you everyone for listening. That was very quick, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them during discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Connie, for a very inspiring sharing. And also the last slide was a fantastic summary of very important points as well. Thanks for highlighting the importance of legal reform and how advocates like us, it's very important for us to engage the policymakers and government authorities and keeping ourselves updated, which is also to join SMACC as well. That brings me to remind everyone to also think about the prompts and the questions that Nicola shared earlier about working and keeping ourselves up to date through SMACC. So think about what support do you need from SMACC and what else do you want to see at the next SMACC summit as well, which will be after the Q&A panel sessions. Just keep your questions coming up in the chat, and the amazing SMACC team will be collating those questions for later discussion. So we'll invite our next speaker, Adam. Adam has worked with federal and local law enforcement agencies across the globe on implementing and improving enforcement of animal cruelty and fighting laws. He has trained thousands of law enforcement officers on these topics as well as consulting on hundreds of cases, including those involving online investigations. So today, Adam will be talking about how to work with law enforcement. Welcome, Adam. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just share my screen here. Let's see. Okay. Oops, that was not the right one. Hold on. What happened? Shoot.
Would you like help from our side, Adam, to share screen?
I think I've got it now. I don't know why it did that. So thank you for having me this morning. Well, this evening for you guys, this morning, very early for me, because I'm in the West Coast in the United States. Yes, and I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes, just a brief introduction to working with law enforcement. So we work a lot with law enforcement. Sometimes law enforcement approaches us asking for assistance on a case, but a lot of the time we are gathering information that we're then going to bring to law enforcement. So the first thing I was going to talk about is what can we offer as animal welfare advocates or NGOs? What do we offer or can we offer to law enforcement to help them enforce laws on these online cruelty cases? for me, I've been in this field a very long time in humane law enforcement for many years. And social media didn't really come along, wasn't there at the beginning of my career. So it's been a bit of a learning curve. Um, but one of the things I think that we can bring as animal advocates or NGOs, if we are trying to work with law enforcement and get these laws enforced, is of course identification of potential illegal activity online. Many of us are in different groups, and we often get our attention drawn to illegal animal cruelty that it's occurring online. And so law enforcement isn't always as, tuned into that. So that's the first thing. Also, in an ideal world, law enforcement with all of their tools would be doing like the gathering and tracking of evidence from online cruelty in order to build their case. But as Connie mentioned, right, it's very time intensive. A lot of times it's not on the radar of law enforcement. And so one of the things we can do is to try to help gather that evidence to show that there is a crime occurring and then turn it over to them. Another thing I think that animal welfare advocates can do is that we often bring an understanding of the context and the content and how it potentially violates the law. So law enforcement agencies really receive very little training in animal welfare law. In the police academy, it's not really focused on. If they receive anything, it's usually very brief. So they don't always understand all of the context of the law. And sometimes what is posted online isn't immediately obvious to them as being a violation of the law. Of course, if somebody posts a bestiality video or a video of them beating a dog or something like that, it might be more obvious. But especially when you're looking at these worlds like of dog fighting and other types of activity that are illegal, some of the things that are posted may not immediately appear to be illegal to law enforcement. And then, of course, as the case goes on, as many of you may know who work with law enforcement, if there are animals involved in this investigation leads to a case where animals are now being seized. Most law enforcement agencies have no resources for caring for animal victims of these crimes. And so it's a great thing for NGOs to be able to work in collaboration with law enforcement and then take on the care of those animals. Okay. And then when we're talking about approaching law enforcement and working with them, it's important to think about what can help to engage law enforcement, right? They've got a lot on their plate. They're often not necessarily attuned to animal crimes as a priority. So one of the things that can be very helpful is to narrow down the jurisdiction. If we can kind of, rather than here's a video that could have occurred anywhere in the world, if we can help to kind of determine where that abuse or that individual is, and then be contacting the jurisdiction and saying, we know this individual is in your area. It's often easier said than done, but it's important because most law enforcement agencies aren't as inclined to get involved if they don't know if this person is actually in their jurisdiction. Public pressure or media attention can be very helpful. So if there's like a kind of online cruelty that's gone viral and there's a lot of public that's very upset about it, then law enforcement's going to be more willing to kind of get involved and put in the legwork to make the case happen. Again, when we turn over information, we usually, if we're turning over screenshots or whatever it is, we usually ask to meet with law enforcement in person, or at least virtually, so that we can explain the information. Because a lot of times if we just send these screenshots or different things, they may not understand, again, that context. And it's much better if we're able to meet with them and explain what this means to them. Also, and as we heard from Rebecca in her excellent presentation, animal cruelty is is often connected with other forms of violence and other animal crimes. So depending on the particular situation, you may be dealing with individuals who are, have a propensity for violent or for sexual crimes, because we know with bestiality, for example, that people that engage in bestiality are much more likely to engage in either child pornography or child sex crimes. So educating law enforcement about these connections is important. And then if you're talking about kind of organized animal abuse like dog fighting or along those lines, we also know that it's very closely connected with other forms of organized crime. And then one of the barriers that we see is that many law enforcement agencies are reluctant to work with NGOs, even though they need their expertise. But there's kind of like this barrier that exists in the world of law enforcement where, they feel their information is very confidential. They still think of, to be honest, like us in the NGO animal welfare world, unless they've worked with NGOs, as like a bunch of bunny huggers, and that we don't understand anything about confidentiality, and will endanger their case if they bring us in. And so this is building that trust can take some time. So a few key tips. Obviously, we take screenshots and save those of what we see. We download videos as much as we can to make sure we have them. Obviously, people can always take their content off, so we try to preserve what we can. We try to make sure that we've indicated the dates and times that we took those down. We often try to do as much legwork as we can. If there's a phone number or an email if this is coming through a chat group, then we try to search that, find what other posts we can find, what other nicknames, screen names, whatever we can pull off of them, find on them. And then we try to use, obviously you can search for the IP address, but nowadays a lot of people have kind of wised up and are using some sort of system to hide their IP or address. So you can use topography on the photos sometimes to narrow down the locations. And I'm going to give an example of that in a minute. So what is law enforcement then? What do they offer? Like, how can they help us? Well, depending where they're located, certain law enforcement can send preservation warrants or subpoenas to media companies. Now, unfortunately, that has not been honored outside of the US. If they're a US-based company, it has to be a US-based court document. So that's a real barrier. But if they are in the US, they are able to send those. Or if the law enforcement can connect with a US law enforcement who can get a subpoena or a preservation warrant, which just means that the company, even if the person deletes the content, the company will preserve it and not delete it. So it will be there. They can connect with other law enforcement agencies. So if it turns out that not everything is occurring in their jurisdiction, or this goes beyond their jurisdiction, other law enforcement agencies are much more likely to listen to them. They have many ways to track suspects, to get subpoenas for cell phone information, to get names, to get addresses through, registration of vehicles, phones, things like that. And they obviously are the ones that have the authority to take action and actually bring a criminal case. And they can do physical tracking of suspects. So we've had law enforcement agencies that, after we've worked with them to identify the person, they've put GPS trackers on their vehicles or things like that.
Hello, Adam. Sorry to interrupt you. You have 1 minute left.
Okay, so while law enforcement needs probable cause to take action, they can open an investigation with less, right? So they can open an investigation with a much smaller amount of information. They might be resistant because they don't know the laws or the jargon well, right? Online evidence can often be circumstantial. Sometimes it's blatant, clear violations, but again, it may not be enough in and of itself. And not all of it is easy to tie to a real individual, right? That's a big barrier. And then the platforms, as Connie mentioned, differ widely on their willingness to cooperate with law enforcement. So absent a court order, many companies are reluctant to share information. So I'm just going to give just a couple examples of the sort of things that we see online. We see here, this is a dog fighting case. So these are kind of things that often are just open source and we can find online. And we can help to start to gather information like this for law enforcement. And then I'll just close really quick with going through this is an online chat. See, it has a phone number. So we can track that phone number. They might have an ad for selling a truck or something like that. And then that ad may indicate where they're located, things like that. So just to go real quick through this, this was just tracking down a physical address. This was a case where my colleagues had a PO box. They determined where this post office was, where the PO box was associated to. And then they actually followed on Google Maps the power lines, and eventually they tracked them to this property that matched on Google Maps, right? Matched the image that this dog fighter had posted. And so there's all sorts of ways we can be creative to find things online that we're able to then bring to law enforcement, and just be able to show them that this topography is the same location. We can see this mountain in the right, which we could then see later on Google Street View. And then when we looked at the Google Maps satellite view, you can see all the chain spots for the dogs. So that's just an example of something we would put together and bring to law enforcement. Unfortunately, this individual was in Mexico and we did not have cooperation from authorities there, but it can work if it's in their jurisdiction. So I will stop my share and thank you very much for being here and listening to my discussion.
Thank you so much, Adam, for that powerful sharing. And thank you so much for being here, speaking to us at 4+ a.m. at your end. Thanks a lot. And I think your presentation really allowed us to understand the challenges of evidence that's collected, but also to understand the process of what kind of useful information and priority setting can actually allow and support, facilitate action by the enforcement agencies as well. So let us welcome our next speaker, Vinaya Titi. Vinaya is one of our coordinators of the Social Media Animal Cruelty SMACC Coalition under the Asia for Animals Coalition. She assists in SMACC's engagement with social media platforms, including collating data to support advocacy against online animal cruelty. With a background in animal welfare and zoology, Vinaya uses her expertise to help SMACC achieve its goal of making the online environment safer for both animals and humans. Today, Vinaya will be talking about SMACC's work with social media platforms. Welcome, Vinaya.
Thank you, Anbu. Hi, everyone. Before starting, I'd like to acknowledge the speakers in this session, how invaluable the knowledge that you guys are sharing and will be sharing. It really shows the dimension that we are dealing with this issue. In this presentation, I want to focus on another critical aspect, which is working with social media platforms, the very places where cruelty content circulates and gains visibility. Next, please. So this will be a short presentation, but we will go through 7 key points so that you'll walk away with a clear sense of why working with platforms is essential, how SMACC approaches it, and what we have achieved so far. Next. And before we begin, a quick note that some of the examples I will mention may be distressing. Next. So let's start with why SMACC chose collaboration with social media platforms. For SMACC, it means building mutual understanding and shared responsibility, helping platforms recognize cruelty content not only as a policy concern, but as a moral and societal one. And every time such content is shared, liked, or recommended, it doesn't just normalize cruelty, it fuels a cycle of demand and engagement. This is precisely why collaboration with platforms matters for us. We work with them not merely to delete videos, but to change how the system itself responds. ensuring cruelty is recognized, removed, and ultimately discouraged. Next, please. Collaboration is not only about protecting animals through better policies or moderation, but it's also about changing the mindsets and behaviors, both within the companies that run these platforms and among the audiences who use them. And we know that platforms are the primary venues of both harm and influence, where demand and supply feed each other. They hold immense power, but they also hold immense responsibility. In addition to that, social media platforms are deeply globalized, yet transparency and governance remain uneven across regions. For us users and advocates, working with the people who design and manage them might be more productive than treating them as adversaries. So we pursue collaboration constructively and evidence-based because it's meant to be a shared responsibility. When we identify cruelty trends, we reach out directly, presenting data, and our relationships allow us to seek clarity and accountability from within. Next. On the screen here, you can see examples of another once marginalized issue, which is mental health. But it is now a part of platforms' trust and safety priorities. These platforms, along with Mental Health Coalition and WHO, work together to make well-being visible and measurable online, moving from reactive moderation to proactive, evidence-based support. And it shows that when platform sees an issue not as a PR risk, but as a shared responsibility, systemic change becomes possible. For SMACC, that's the same path we are on, following the curve from outsider to partner, from raising awareness to shaping how platforms act. Next. So let's look at how far SMACC has come. SMACC actually began as a two-person initiative in 2020, so we are still a baby, with a small organizational membership and soon engaged Meta through Roundtable with our members. We also held an emergency meeting on monkey torture content, which led to the removal of material and the blocking of related hashtags. Soon after, TikTok approached us, and around the same period, we began engaging with YouTube. In 2023, we became trusted flaggers for both TikTok and YouTube, fully utilizing that role in 2024. We contributed to the development of TikTok's Animal Welfare Safety Center, launched in 2024, and this is a first of its kind on any platform worldwide, and something that educates users on how to spot online cruelty content. That same year, TikTok presented alongside us at the AFA conference at Kuching in 2023, a milestone for our movement. And today, SMACC is recognized as a leading expert on online animal cruelty, engaging with Office of Communications, new platforms, and tech companies. Next, please. So SMACC wants to be in a position where we are trusted, yet persistent and serious. Our approach is grounded in three principles: data, which is evidence-driven; dialogue, constructive; and drive, which is initiative. But how did we start? Next, please. It is basically through trial and error, because there's no one-size-fits-all method when it comes to approaching platforms. We ended up with this framework. First, we find the right person to speak to, often through appeals signed by our SMACC membership and the wider AFA network. And then we give them reports, press stories, then introduce animal cruelty issues once we have their attention. Once connection has been established, we need to keep the dialogue open and consistent. Therefore, we have regular meetings. This is followed by task development, depending on what issue we are discussing, and ongoing actions. Next. Some concrete examples of what we have done so far when reaching out to platforms. With SMACC reports, they have been the tool to engage conversation with platforms, with existing working relationships and new. Appeal letters to X, formerly Twitter, and Bilibili to remove cruelty content, along with a preliminary data. Animal cruelty content also guides as introduction to the issue for platforms to learn, which is what we did with YouTube. And lastly, with TikTok, this is actually because of our network. So our network is invaluable. Connections have been made with platform contacts via our network. Some efforts failed, others succeeded, but each refined our strategy and built our credibility. Next. Through these efforts, we've achieved milestones that prove systemic change is possible. So thanks to SMACC and our members, 3 major platforms have instigated policy changes. For example, Meta and YouTube now explicitly list staged or fake rescues as violations of their community guidelines. Our collaboration with TikTok has been especially productive and is the first public relationship between SMACC and a social media platform. And recently, I think Nicola covered this on day 1. Our member uniquely paused compiled evidence against several fake rescue accounts in Uganda. And SMACC passed this to TikTok, which removed them directly from the back end. If I'm not mistaken, 76 accounts out of 76 accounts were removed. Next, please. Of course, progress hasn't been easy. We are still developing our blueprint for collaboration between APOs and social media platforms. So every proposal, meeting, flagging process has been built through trial and error, often adapting lessons from other movements. Commercial incentives remain a major barrier. Algorithm rewards engagement, and shock content, including cruelty, unfortunately, often drives the engagement. So this creates tension between welfare priorities and profit. We also face limited transparency. Few platforms share takedown data or response times, making enforcement hard to assess. And there's also a knowledge gap on animal welfare, something SMACC and its members work to fill through training and resource sharing. Operationally, platforms enforcement is fragmented. Policies vary across regions and platforms. And of course, platform staff turnover is also high, making continuity difficult. And from SMACC side, resources are limited compared with the scale of the problem. But each obstacle shows us where the next opportunity lies. Next.
Hello, Vinaya. So
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. You have 1 minute left.
Thank you. So how do we move forward? This diagram shows SMACC's pathway towards sustainable collaboration from short-term wins to systemic change. So we are currently at stage 1, which is partnerships. So we build trust through roundtables, data sharing, joint initiative. They are easier to start but short-lived unless nurtured. We want to proceed to stage 2, which is capacity building, developing training modules for moderators and knowledge sharing among members. This takes time but yields lasting results. And lastly, the most permanent one is policy and standards change, embedding animal welfare into governance. We need clear definitions, transparency, and inclusion in trust and safety priorities. These steps are interlinked. Partnerships build the foundation, capacity strengthens it, and policy secures it in place. Next. So before I close, 3 key takeaways from this presentation. First, evidence builds trust, not confrontation. It earns us a seat at the table and keeps dialogue open. Second, partnership is a process, not a one-off, and true collaboration takes patience and persistence. And third, systemic change takes alignment, capacity, and perseverance. Because we're not only removing harmful videos, we're changing how platforms think about cruelty, empathy, and accountability. Next. So ending online animal cruelty is not something any one group can achieve alone. It requires openness and cooperations, and SMACC's own story reflects that. We began as 2 people starting a conversation, and we have grown into a coalition of 40 organizations, which is quite a lot, and we help shape real policy discussions. So to our fellow animal protection organizations and our colleagues in tech, law enforcement, and social media, we welcome you to connect with us, and we hope this summit opens the door to ongoing dialogue. And our next step is to make collaboration not reactive, but continuous and systemic. To our audience, thank you for being part of this discussion. Over to you, Anbu.
Thank you, Vinaya, for that amazing presentation and sharing. for the fantastic work and all the tireless efforts of SMACC as well. SMACC has come a long way and has really spotlighted a very quickly and widely growing issue of online animal cruelty. Having attended SMACC's events in the past few years, I've learned a lot as well when we're engaging relevant government agencies. It was shared yesterday, a lot of resources on SMACC's website. We continue to encourage our participants to use those resources on SMACC's website for awareness and to also spread the word to other advocates so they can join the initiatives and attend these events to do more of this work. So we will invite our next speaker, Melody Kwan. Melody is a responsible pet parent advocate, content creator, and host of the MellowCats Expert Chat podcast. Through conversations with experts such as law enforcement and animal protection agencies, she explores responsible cat parenting alongside the growing problem of animal-related scams online. By uncovering manipulative content and sharing tools suggested by experts, Melody equips audiences to identify red flags, report scams, and amplify ethical, trustworthy narratives that protect both animals and public trust. Today, Melody will be talking about using social media for good. Over to you, Melody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So let's jump right in. We know that social media is an extremely powerful tool. It rescuers, donors, and communities at lightning speed. But that also connects fraudsters, scammers, manipulators just as fast. So today in my talk, I'm going to talk about how we can explore these tools on these same platforms, the ones that sometimes cause harm, to actually protect the people and the animals in need. Before I start, I want to introduce myself. If you follow me online, my name is MellowCat. In real life, my name is Melody Kwan. Through my YouTube channel and my podcast, I share tips and tricks on how to be a better pet parent and how to optimize one's cat lifestyle. That said, I have a podcast called MellowCats Expert Chat where I take the time to talk to experts from all over the world, anything from law enforcement to animal protection agencies, food scientists, animal behaviorists, and the like. And lately, we've been spending a lot of time to talk about how the internet shapes the way we treat animals. Now, let me give you an example. So here's two stories. The one with the black dog lying on a hospital blanket saying urgent surgery needed tonight. It's now or never. Now, 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 now. Or the dog dies. Usually these ones are the ones that go viral. These posts have thousands of dollars donated in lightning speed, but guess what? A lot of times the photos are stolen or the dog wasn't even in that city. Maybe it was a photo from 10 years ago from some shelter. And of course, as you know it, that money usually vanishes and goes nowhere. Now, on the other side, if you look at the one on the top, another rescue, same platform, similar kind of posts, but this time they all come with updates with vet reports, location tags, follow-ups from the new adopters, and contacts that you could actually verify and check, or even walk into the shelter and see if it's a real thing. Now, people not only donate in these ones, but they kept supporting the cause and the shelter a lot longer because they know that it's genuine. Now, these two posts by nature looks almost identical. However, one damaged trust, whereas the other one builds it. And that is a paradox of social media. It's not inherently good or bad on its own, but it reflects what we amplify. Now, across my research and interviews, I keep seeing the same pattern. Scammers steal photos, they fraud vet bills, even stage cruelty in some cases for clicks. Some keep dozens of animals in horrible, horrible conditions just to film the before and after rescue footage. Now, algorithms don't reward truth, they reward emotion. So the more distressing the story, the faster it spreads because of our likes and clicks and our comments and their sharing and our rage. Every share, every comment, every emoji push that post further and keeps it on the feed. Meanwhile, genuine rescuers who are transparent and responsible, they struggle for visibility because honesty doesn't trigger that outrage. It's probably just another day of rescuing. It's not nearly as tear-jerking or as urgent as some of those fraudulent posts. This is where education and vigilance matter. So I'm going to share a few lessons I've learned from the podcast Mellicat's Expert Chat. The first one is with Alistair Field. He's a fraud prevention expert and former law enforcement officer who spent decades studying how these scammers think and operate. We recorded this episode after seeing a wave of online donation frauds that hit several rescue groups. Now, he calls this affinity fraud, where fraudsters join communities built on trust, the ones that you and I go on all the time, like animal lover groups and pet enthusiast groups, because they know compassion can override that skepticism. They usually use urgency. So things like, the cat will die tonight, it will get euthanized if the funds don't come in, or you're their only hope. It's emotional blackmail, really. They rationalize their crimes by telling themselves that, hey, these victims are rich, they got money to spend, or the cause is harmless. It's a victimless crime. In here, Alistair says that their favorite and their greatest weapon is time pressure and urgency. And our best defense is just to stop and slow down. His line still sits with me to this day. If it feels too urgent or too perfect, it's a red flag. Now, when we pause, even just say for 30 seconds, we shift from emotion back to logic. And that's often enough to prevent a scam from happening or even spreading. So the takeaway is to pause before reacting. Urgency is often these manipulators' favorite tool. Now, the second one is from Dr. Vladislava, a criminologist and a former law enforcement trainer. We spoke during the pandemic when online puppy and kitten scams were a thing and they were just exploding everywhere because everyone is staying at home. Now, she saw how people isolated during lockdowns became super easy targets. Now, scammers use believable courier stories or fake adoption listings and emotional blackmail to rush decisions. Her 3-step rule is something I now repeat often in my protocol. Pause, research, confirm. Just like Alistair said, stop for 30 seconds, step away from the screen, pause before taking any action. This includes sending money or even reposting or reacting. Research, reverse image search on Google. Search the photo, check the group's registration, look for inconsistencies or even AI-generated photos, or just cross-reference with whatever resources you have, be it social media or groups or experts. Confirm. Ask for a live video or an official record before you believe a word or take any actions. The real ones have no trouble showing it to you and have no problem with you coming into the shelter if you happen to be in the location. Slowing down isn't just about saving money. It literally saves animals from being exploited as props for fraud. So the key takeaway for this is critical thinking protects compassion. So therefore, slow down before you act. The next one is from Stephen Quant. He's a certified feline behavior specialist from New York. He's worked with the ASPCA and even on the post-Chernobyl animal aid projects. Now, he helped me connect the dots between behavior science, rescue ethics, and governance. For example, in the US, groups like the ASPCA and Animal Carrier Centers are registered nonprofits, which means volunteers are trained, they are monitored, and they follow safety protocols, and there's a chain of accountability. As opposed to, say, Asia, or even where I live in Hong Kong, anyone can label themselves as a rescuer or a volunteer in a lot of cases, and that lack of structure allows exploitation, even hoarding in some cases where it hides behind good intentions. Now, Stephen reminds us that transparency and governance are what separates care from chaos. If a rescue can't show clear updates or oversight, that's a sign to question, not to share. Do not share. Now, the takeaway is real rescue is accountable, not just emotional. Now, going back to how to use social media for good, what can we do as individuals? Well, a lot. Verify before you share. Ask yourself, who posted this? Why are they posting this? Is there proof of what they're doing? And can I trace the vet the shelter, or do I see a track record of what the people in the community say about this individual or this post? This is where referencing on different socials is extremely necessary. As communities, we share checklists, we organize reporting networks, and we talk openly about these scams. So fewer people fall victim in silence, thinking it's just a one-time thing. A lot of cases it's not. I've seen rescue groups in Hong Kong now collaborate with shelters and associations abroad to cross-verify these suspicious posts. And that's the kind of cooperation that we need. So think of ourselves as these meerkats, part of a community, a close-knit community. And this is a simple framework that I use whenever I evaluate a post. You see it? That's when something catches your attention or my attention. You vet it, you check for the details, you look for proof or disproof. Report it. If it's false or if it's exploitative, flag it to the community and flag it to the platform. Replace it. Share it with something authentic in its place, something that's worth sharing and something that is creditable. It might sound small, but these actions build up over time. They change what algorithms reward and what narratives rise to the top. Every click is like a mini vote. Don't forget that. I want to end on saying that social media reflects us. It can be a megaphone for manipulation, or it could be a mirror for integrity. Every share, every comment is a tiny act of influence. If we choose to amplify verified rescues, expert guidance, and stories grounded in compassion rather than just sheer shock, we can turn social media into the world's largest classroom for empathy. And these stories that we share and amplify really do shape the world that we live in. And thank you for being a healthy part of it. If you want to stay connected, here's my socials. Follow me on YouTube, follow me on IG, on my podcast and Spotify. And of course, there's always my website. Thank you very much, everyone. And back to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Melody, for thoughtfully sending us this session, keeping the connectivity issues in mind. But Melody is here today for the Q&A and panel discussion later. Thanks for sharing about the behaviors online, which many of us probably can relate to, if not, even our family members or friends who may innocently forward a staged rescue video to us or even fall for scams as well. But also the working behind the scenes that actually dictates these behaviors for us. Thanks so much for the sharing, and thank you for all the wonderful, fantastic speakers for all the valuable insights. So we will now move on to our 10-minute break. So, and after which we will have the panel discussion and the Q&A session as well. So we will be coming back at, waiting for the next slide, in 10 minutes. So we will be returning back at 8:40 sharp, GMT +8 timing. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much to the participants for staying on, and also to all the speakers once again. So we will now start the panel discussion. I do have some questions for our speakers. And after this, we will be tabling the questions that you have submitted in the chat. And the SMACC team has collated everything for us to ask our speakers as well. So welcome back to those who are coming in. So let me start with a question for all of the panelists. Many of you actually highlighted systemic issues related to the law, legal reforms, the enforcement, and also the platforms as well. If the speakers could share, where do you see the most immediate opportunities for collaboration across all these dimensions? Maybe we start with Connie.
Yeah, sure. I think something to mention is that something to remember with law enforcement, I think, they can only act if they are authorized to do so. So I think there has to be something written in the law. What makes it very difficult right now for law enforcement is due to the fact that most countries do not regulate these platforms. with the exception of the very recent Digital Services Act in the UK, right? But certainly in Taiwan, it's very difficult to get these companies to cooperate because by law they don't have to, right? So pushing for legislation, of course, is very important. I also think that we should try to establish more effective cross-border cooperation. With cybercrime or animal cruelty online, the problem, it may span several countries. So, for example, the animals may be caught illegally in, say, Southeast Asia, but then the content is filmed and then distributed to different countries, different platforms. Even the content may be bought by, people from other countries, right? So I think coordination between law enforcement agencies in different countries would be very helpful. For example, I know in Taiwan, we have MOUs in place regarding fighting certain types of crime. And the MOUs with other countries are in place. So if we could get animal abuse cases in there, right, I think we could have a better chance in trying to catch these perpetrators.
Yeah, thank you, Connie. Maybe we'll hear from Adam next.
Yeah, that was excellently said, Connie, and I would agree with a lot of that. I think there was some discussion in the chat, for example, in Vietnam about some of these platform users that are in Vietnam, and that's one place where the laws aren't really there yet in a lot of levels for animal welfare in Vietnam, which makes it challenging. The other thing I was going to say is, I agree 100% in terms of cooperating between law enforcement agencies, or we've tried to work with some of these Europol, Interpol to kind of get them similarly to include, for example, dog fighting, obviously a passionate issue of mine, so I bring it up a lot. We do work on other forms of cruelty, but because of the organized nature, and get it included in these in the kind of work that they cover, as like to raise awareness that it is another form of organized crime, as are, for example, many of these sort of bestiality, whether it's crush videos or just flat, other forms of bestiality videos. They are businesses, right? And they're criminal businesses, basically. People are in it for the money. And so I think trying to get an understanding amongst legislators and law enforcement that these are a business. These aren't just individuals. I mean, there are, of course, individuals who are posting, kind of sick videos out there, but a lot of this is based on making money, right? And so it's a criminal enterprise, and getting that awareness raised, I think, is really critical.
Thank you, Adam. I think when Connie also shared about the cross-border collaboration, I think that would be a really important but next step as well, when you mentioned about people operating as a syndicate for the monetization as well. Maybe if you could hear from Melody. You're muted, Melody.
Oh, sorry. I was getting kind of cut in and out. Sorry about my internet. Sorry, can you rephrase the question? Because I only heard like half of it.
Yeah, sure. Because we were today discussing a lot of systemic issues on the law reforms, the enforcement investigation, and also platforms as well. From your opinion, from your experience, where do you see like the most immediate opportunities for collaboration across these different dimensions?
Okay, well, I can speak for Hong Kong because I see a lot of the case studies here, so perhaps I could use that as reference. When it comes to digital content, it's very hard to enforce here because here with animal cruelty, we have a statute of limitation of 6 months. So if you can't prove it, even in physical animal abuse cases, it's really hard because if they can brush you off for 6 months, then that's it. After that, it's like nothing happened. Now, when it comes to digital content, it's even harder because of two things that I observe. one, how can you actually prove to law enforcement that that puppy you're seeing in the video is the puppy that is, say, in this apartment? Because they can look similar, you know what I mean? They can share the same characteristics, but there's no way you can prove to them 100% that it's the same place. So that's where it comes in with the biggest headache, because there's standstills in Hong Kong where there's obvious animal abuse. It's right in front of the law enforcement side, and then the shelters are here trying to help. But it's almost like they're kicking a soccer ball around. It's like, okay, we can't open, for example, like SPCA or a lot of the shelters there, they can't do anything unless somebody opens a case with the police. And the police is like, oh, well, if we don't see cruelty, if we don't think it's cruelty, then therefore we're not going to do anything. So basically, you have an animal that's there either digitally on video that you know it's in this apartment, or it's a physical animal. It's just a standstill, and a lot of times the animals perish like that. So it's very, very frustrating. Now, going back to what I was saying about the statute of limitation, I think we've been trying to fight for that in Hong Kong, but even that, it's very difficult. Not to mention that not all animals are required, like domesticated animals, cats, dogs. They don't require microchip for cats here, not yet. So again, they could say, okay, this cat looks similar. How can you prove this is the cat? You can't. So it's very frustrating, and we're still working on it in Hong Kong.
Definitely. Thanks, Melody. I think that is a frustration that many animal advocates here who do investigation work and work very closely with the enforcement agencies can relate to, sadly. But we will come to that part later on the follow-up on the investigation. I see one of the questions has been put in the list as well from the chat.
And I forgot to add that the animal police in Hong Kong currently, they're actually just police officers that are assigned with animal cruelty related cases. From our experience, they may or may not be trained to deal with it in a lot of cases. They're just somebody who's handled cases like that. And they just handle it like as if they're just a little bit better than a civilian from our experience. It's frustrating for both, but it's also frustrating for them, understandably. They're just handed stuff like that. So that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think that also presents the point that you raised, the capacity building for the enforcement officers, where organizations can actually support, and that adds to the point that Adam shared as well. How can we facilitate the process to make it better for the animal? Thanks, Melody. And if we could move to Rebecca, hear from Rebecca, please.
Yes. Well, clearly enforcement is important, consistent enforcement, which is, I'm afraid, not as widely seen as we would hope across many jurisdictions. But one thing to point out is that the people that are involved in mercy release, they don't think what they're doing is wrong, right? And that's why I mentioned in the very end of my PowerPoint presentation, when dealing with crime or deviant behavior or harmful behavior, people tend to have rational techniques to justify what they're doing. Okay, so for an act like mercy release, where it's a gray area, they won't listen. They're completely blinded to the fact. Okay, now on the other hand, for acts that are clearly illegal and unlawful, so I refer to my examples and my research into the wildlife trade, these guys know full on what they're doing is unlawful. You can't be selling a tiger skin. I mean, come on, there must be some kind of illegality behind that. But then again, they justify it and they say they're providing a service. Right. And then when you're, enforcement is important, but if they're not enforced, they keep doing what they're doing because these guys are rational beings. It brings them money, right? And they don't see what they're doing is harmful because they're only providing a service. So it actually goes back to what I'm trying to say is that it's all a social construction. They don't think what they're doing is wrong, right? And these people, so again, jumping back to the mercy release example, nobody stops them, right? I try very gently to tell them that it's actually bad. They just think we're stereotyping them, we're discriminating against them. Okay, so it is actually really frustrating, and there's obstacles to making it illegal because these guys just don't care. They just think that we're labeling them as deviant.
Yeah.
Actually, if I might, sorry, if I might add to that after, because I'm
Yeah.
from the same region as Rebecca. So sorry to cut in, but I might have to add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Please
because
go on, Melody. Yeah.
sorry, because I completely agree with what Rebecca just said. Like yours is with mercy release, whereas from what I see, it's basically blatant animal scams with fake rescuers. It's the same thing when you go to the law enforcement; they are actually confused. They don't know if they're doing a bad thing. They're like, "Oh, are these people begging? Like, are they? It's not illegal to beg." Like, are they just asking for money? Like, are they scamming? Like that line really blurs because the facade that these fake rescuers put on is that they're all loving, it's all about animal care, but you know they have a track record of pulling that same trick. But when it goes to the law enforcement, they're like, no, they look like very loving people. They may be just in financial hardship, just asking for $1 or $2. But statistics don't lie. If these people have a track record of doing it for a certain number of years, and law enforcement would say the same thing. It's like, oh, we're unclear of their intentions when it's really clear. So just to kind of resonate with what Rebecca just said. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Melody. I think it's very true as well. And even for the illegal wildlife trade topic that Rebecca brought up is it took many years before it was recognized as a serious organized crime. I know Hong Kong did it as well, but I think a couple of years ago or 1 year ago, Singapore did it, where it was included in the illegal wildlife trade was included in the serious organized crime. So I think prioritization based on the case volume might be also another challenge, looking from the perspective of the enforcement agency, to see they may not always act on many cases, particularly when it's online with challenges and evidences. So that is definitely a challenge and frustration that many of us feel as a pain point. Can we hear from Vinaya as well to add on to this?
Yeah, I'm just gonna add just a bit. When you said about immediate opportunities for collaborations, I instinctively thought that this would be different for different regions, depending on how much the progress on this online animal cruelty fight has happened. For example, in the UK, we do already have this online safety bill, but what about other regions, especially in Asia, in Indonesia? Of course, maybe we have the animal welfare law, but does that apply to online animal cruelty? So it really depends on, how advanced our understanding, and I think the most possible immediate opportunities would be collaboration between experts, just like this, different dimension, different background, with Professor Rebecca's knowledge, with Connie's knowledge. We can all combine them together and custom it according to what country we're in. So we need to do a lot of research for that. That's just my thought.
I think that is a very important point, and I'm glad that SMACC is also bringing everyone together, so we can be a collective force to handle this issue as well. So,
can I just add to that, Anbu?
Yes, please, Connie.
Yeah, I just want to mention, as many of the speakers have today already, I think a main issue right now is I think most people, including law enforcement, they're only familiar with direct physical harm on animals. So that's easier to understand for most people, and it's more obvious. But a lot of times what we see, cruelty to animals, including mercy release or psychological harm or, illegal wildlife trade, that those are all issues that many law enforcement, if not all, are not very familiar with. So I think, one time a few years back, like we were invited to do a educational seminar with the police here in Taipei City, and our inspectors went, and she came back and said a lot of the police officers were snoozing and taking naps, like while we were talking about these different types of animal abuse. So I think we still have a long ways to go in this aspect. Yeah. Education is very important.
Definitely. I think that comes back to brings me to this question to you, Connie, because you've had a lot of experience engaging decision makers at the policy level, pushing for legal reforms and different aspects. Maybe if you could share with us how to engage the policymakers better from your own experience?
Yes. Well, I think with policymakers, well, first of all, I think we need to remember that most likely people will agree that animal cruelty, especially the more obvious types, is horrific and should not happen. And this is the same with policymakers, right? So sometimes it may just be that they don't know about the issue yet. And I think certainly with different policymakers, like they're individuals, right? So they may care about certain things more than other issues. So of course, I think strategically, like what we do here is we try to reach out to policymakers that we know have spoken out about animals before. And sometimes you just do like a Google search um, and or we know if they have a pet, they may be more keen to help. And I don't want to sound sexist or anything, but at least here, we try to approach women legislators more, just because a lot of women, just from experience, they tend to be a little more sympathetic with animal issues, right? So if you have limited time and resources, we sort of pick out the ones that we think we may have better successes with. And I think, of course, like I mentioned in my presentation, you need to know what you're talking about, right? I mean, legislators, we've approached legislators before, and in the beginning, you could kind of sense that they were not very interested in what we were saying. But I think towards the end of the meeting, when we start bringing out research data, or we are able to answer, questions that they may have in a professional way, you can kind of sense that a change in their tone of voice almost, like they start to believe what you're saying, right? So I think a lot of times animal groups, we have to be professional with our research findings and our data and the way we present these facts. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Connie, for sharing that. And I think it also resonates with the point that Adam shared in the presentation about building the trust as well, because there might be some hesitation in engaging non-governmental groups or animal welfare advocates due to many reasons, but the data, the credibility of the information that's coming out, and the key ask from the organizations does play an important role in engaging the policy. Thanks, Connie. And I want to ask a question to Rebecca. You spoke about the human-animal abuse link. We heard some success stories from SMACC on engaging platforms in terms of the policy, and to some extent on harmful online content in some countries as well. If you could share with us how this link, this knowledge can actually strengthen advocacy in law enforcement or even platform policies. If you could share with us the potential of this angle, even if you have any case studies or success stories to quote.
Well, I think if you have to, people have to be aware, not just policymakers, because the nature of these animal abuse cases, it's often not self-reporting, right? You're not going to abuse your cat and then call the police. That's not how it works, right? So people, I think in general, the public has to have an awareness of what inflicting pain and suffering on an animal actually looks like, right? So sometimes you see dogs being on leash in a hot summer day, right, with no water, and cats, in pet stores, they're kept in horrible conditions, stuff like that. I think you, as citizens, has I wouldn't say duty because that is legally imposed duty of care, but needs to have an awareness of what is good and bad for the animal, right, and then to bring it to the attention of authorities. Okay, but if we do that, if we have this awareness, there comes another problem is that people become too aware, right? And they're reporting cases that is not necessarily animal abuse. It could be, the poor dog in the hot summer day might literally be there for 5 seconds and he's fine after that. Okay, so it's actually a very difficult to balance. But then I think it's just that this public knowledge that you have to be aware most people that are not nice to animal by choice probably will not become serial killers and murderers. But then animal abuse is an indicator of aggression later in life. Okay, so I think that that kind of guideline has to be communicated to just everyone in general, right? So if you bring in this human factor, the fact that someone abuses a dog could possibly, potentially, a couple of years down the line, harm a human being, then I think the whole perspective and narrative around animal abuse would become very different, because then, it becomes egocentric. It becomes about a human being, right? And I'm afraid this is how you could push for change, right? Because people will think, not everyone is sympathetic to a dying cat that's been abused. You get angry, but you probably forget about it in 2 days, right? But whereas if it's someone that's been abusing animals and in turn it's aggression onto a human being, I think that would have a very different angle.
Definitely. I think I agree with you on the awareness part, that we need more people to connect the dots there, to see the link as well, to understand the intensity of the issue. Sorry, I may have missed quite a few comments coming in. It's good that the engagement is there. People are discussing the topic in the chat as well. Perhaps I would like to ask one closing before we go to the participants' questions. Because we have heard both challenges and opportunities with platforms, but from your experiences and also working with from the research side and also NGOs and also as a content creator, what's one way NGOs or other stakeholders can actually constructively influence the tech companies? If the speakers have any insights on that, inputs on that, that would be fantastic.
Oh, I love how you asked that. I was going to raise a point that is pretty close to that, which is kind of related to what Rebecca was saying. So on one of the podcasts that I did, I think last year, also ex-law enforcement as a guest speaker, there was a very good tactic for them to get to it. So they said, if, they say humans are inherently more selfish, and if it has nothing to do with them, sometimes they don't take action. Because you can't brainwash somebody to like animals. And if some people, they just won't change unless they feel the hurt, like what Rebecca said. They said one of the good ways to do it is to link it to farm animals, to cows, to poultry and stuff. Because when people start to raise the bar for that, they start to use that as like a baseline for domesticated animals, for endangered animals. And it actually works pretty well, because it's almost like a foot in the door, because who doesn't know about farm animals, but people don't think enough about them. And then you have advocates who talk about, how many chickens in a pen, how do you treat cows, because they're also sentient creatures. And that's where the line kind of blurs, but it's also a good gateway to get these people to care. And you can get more people on board, because there's already advocates or associations that care about that cause, and you can get them to team up with you and use that foot in the door technique. I find that very interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Melody. I think that is definitely one way to awaken the compassion for these animals as well, to be aware and act on it, take action. Perhaps if any of the other speakers have any insights on influencing tech companies, maybe from your own experience, you've engaged companies or platforms. How can we work with them, NGOs, or even other stakeholders, researchers, for example? Vinaya earlier shared as well, but yeah, please go ahead, Adam.
Okay, I can jump in. I just want to add one thing on the link, and then I'll just a quick thing on that. So I just wanted to say on the link, in terms of law enforcement, we always start all of our trainings with the link, right? Like with slides on the link. And one of the things that I found helpful, because my background when I started in Washington, D.C. in the 90s had one of the highest homicide rates in the world outside of conflict zones. And I actually, and I would tell law enforcement officers, I kept a book that I called The Link, and it was basically the people that we were interacting with on animal cruelty and how many of them went on to either commit homicides or be victims of homicides, and kind of, so I always try to share that real life experience with them, which I think is helpful, because as Melanie just said, people can be very people centric, and so bringing it back to people is always super helpful. In terms of companies, I was just going to share one example that we had. So years ago, when I first started, Amazon used to sell these cockfighting magazines on their on Amazon. Actually, you could go on and buy it. Seems really weird to imagine nowadays, but they did just sell these cockfighting magazines. And for us, because we have a large presence in the United States, we were able to kind of like get our members and followers to basically flood Amazon with, I know it's not a social media platform, but it's kind of similar, right? With with complaints essentially, and they did end up removing them once they realized. And I think a lot of times, people generally are very concerned and responsive, and of course companies are dependent on people following them and wanting to use their product. So we found that to be effective at times.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thanks, Adam, for sharing. And I mean, from my previous work experience as well, I can share that some of the companies' platforms actually also hold their offices in Singapore. So inviting them to the rescue center, to your own facility or sanctuary that you're operating, a point that Connie also mentioned is that at some point they wake up to the issue because they are witnessing in real life and connecting with the issue. And we hope that that will also allow them to open up to certain changes that the organizations like us are asking for. One example is TikTok, for example. They were really open. They visited the rescue center. They heard some of the issues, and we were so glad what SMACC could achieve with those. And since we were talking about the link, and there were some comments about the link between animal cruelty and human cruelty as well. So I'm going to move on to the questions that were posed by our participants. And thanks so much to the SMACC team for collating them for us as well. So the first question is to Rebecca. Has there been challenges to the graduation hypothesis? Because we were just talking about it. And what about social, cultural reasons?
Right. Yes. There has been challenges. So the first one is the correlation and the causation has been contested, right? There's the critiques about the data sample, if it's self-selecting, if there's bias. Okay, so in terms of how the hypothesis was established and whether animal abuse will definitely lead to violence in later age has also been contested, because a lot of these people that are violent, these criminals, they don't just abuse animals. They could vandalize. They could have arson. They could set fire to things at a very young age, right? So it's just one of the risk factor, if not even a risk factor in later aggression. Okay, so it has been challenged, but then I think also a different social and context would also contest it. So, for example, if you live in a farm, or if you grew up in a farm, and if you grew up in a metropolitan, the way in which you view animal abuse would be very, very different, right? So, if you are not kind to an animal, how you can't have the same standard when you're living with farm animals versus if you're living in Hong Kong in a tiny flat. Okay, because it's very different. So there also comes the question whether this animal abuse was deliberate or was it accidental. Okay, and then the other challenge is that or perhaps one of the most biggest challenge is that the act of animal abuse is broadly defined. Okay, so what was the extent of their abuse? Okay, if they were, if you have a small children being unkind to animal, of course that's a red flag. You don't want kids to be not nice to any living beings. But then the extent of violence in the nature would be very different as well. Okay, so in my career, I have heard absolutely horrifying story. I've heard schoolgirls putting hamsters in a blender. Okay, I mean that clearly there's something very wrong with it, right? But on the other hand, you could have a little boy just pulling a dog's tail because he doesn't know any better, and he would probably only do it once, right, just for fun. So how do you distinguish what actually is animal abuse and what isn't? comes into play as well, and that varies across different culture and context. And in some jurisdiction, there's not even law or legal definition of animal abuse. So all that's the challenge the graduation hypothesis has been faced with.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I think that also brings, this reminded me of some cases as well that we have come across before in Singapore, where how young persons, they are cases are handled when a young person is involved, and how the system treats in terms of whether there are proper rehabilitation or whether there are particular issues that are being addressed. Anyway, that's not related to today's topic. So I'll move on to the next question to Vinaya, actually. There's a question on whether does SMACC has to have a depository of social media cruelty case folios, whether these went on to prosecution or sanctions or not for any reason.
We unfortunately don't have that yet, but it is a good idea for us now that we're gaining a new staff for SMACC, which so that means more capacity to do more things that our members want us to do. And I think this would be a very great resource for anyone, not only for NGO, but for law enforcement, for lawmakers. But we do collaborate with our members in making blogs when it comes to success stories, prosecutions, like Monkey Mimi. I think we did have a blog with Action for Primates and Sarah Kite from Action for Primates. So yeah, I'll take that note as something that we are going to do in the future. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Vinaya. Sorry, we're adding more and more stuff to do for the SMACC team. So our next question is for Adam. There's a question on what's been your biggest challenge in following up on the perpetrators and how have you managed it? There were some more questions also on investigations, because what you shared during your presentation was very interesting. And I think that is something that many of the organizations can also relate to, is the risk when I'm combining two questions here. So the second one is there a risk that we fail to collect evidence if we report content and the platform actually takes it down?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. But I'll start with the first one, which is like the biggest challenge, I think, when it comes to online investigations. No matter what tools we develop or law enforcement develops, then these folks on these platforms like develop ways to, not on the platforms, but the end users, they develop ways to kind of skirt them. So it's been very difficult. And I can tell you that just interestingly, so I had a case very early on with in my career at Humane World with a guy that produced and monitored and sort of like pushed forward this idea of bestiality. He calls himself a zoophile, right? And he really felt like this should be legal and that animals can consent, and just all this craziness. But simultaneously, he was also one of the first people to develop software for hiding your IP address, right? So clearly, I think he had a motivation for developing that software. He also sold it and made money that way. But I think this is one of the, this is the first challenge when it comes to social media is tracking down the perpetrators. And I'm no tech expert by any means, right? So I don't have all sorts of fancy tech tools, but we're often able to just sort of track them through, as I said, like a whole variety of ways through open source. We also have a lot of, my colleague has developed some Facebook profiles that are very, very well integrated and respected at this point in certain, like, she works on dogfighting. So in certain dogfighting circles, and is able to get admitted to private groups and things like that. So I think creating those fake profiles can be a really excellent way to engage, but it takes time. It takes time to build that, right? People aren't just going to admit you, but once you get enough friends that are like respected already in that world, you can kind of get in there. So the second part, just sorry, I just lost the thread on the second. What was the second question?
So if we report to the platforms and
Oh,
they
yes.
remove it, then the
Yes.
evidence
Got it. Okay. So this is excellent question, because it's one of those things I struggle with a lot, right? So whether it's reporting the post itself or trying to get the platform taken down. So for example, when it comes to bestiality, there used to be a really big site called Beast Forum. I used this site extensively because it had like a personals section that you could search by state or country, and they would have a chat for that country, and then you could kind of go in there and you could track folks, and then we could contact law enforcement when we saw something that was actionable and say, hey, we found this. And a few years ago, Anonymous started targeting bestiality sites. Great work. Like, it was amazing, but they got it taken down, and it's been a real sort of loss for us on the investigative front, right? To not have access to that. But at the same time, right, we don't want to have these platforms where people can communicate and continue their business, but it's just forced them more underground. So I think it's always a bit of a mixed bag in terms of getting these sites taken down. When it comes to the individual posts, that's why we do try to do screenshots, or if we can download the video, things like that, so we can preserve it. So if they take it down, then it's still available.
Thanks for sharing that tip as well, Adam. So we have a few more questions here. So if you have any questions, they have been collated here. But if there are questions that are not answered, I think there's some instructions in the chat as well on further follow-ups after the event. So this may be Melody might be more aware on this. So someone asked if they have not seen any AI-generated cruelty fake rescue content, thankfully, on social media being brought up yet. Not sure if you want to go there. There's a comment on that. If you have any views on this, that would be great as well. We can have because there's a lot of fake content that's being generated, and inadvertently investigators may be, looking into it without knowing it might be actually fake AI-generated content.
Yeah, thank God. So far, haven't heard any of the interviewees talk about that yet. That said, I think the lines are starting to blur. Although I guess with the AI-generated content, like the fake rescues, that hasn't kicked in yet. But the photos have, where they start, like they just edit it crazy, and they take a picture from somewhere else and they manipulate it to the point that to the point it looks like it's their rescue. So it's usually not video that we're seeing, it's actually the pictures, which makes it a lot easier, I guess. And it's not so much on social media that it's that they're seeing it right now for these pictures, because people know how to reverse image search and they can find the similar pictures, and it gets busted easily. The how it creeps in, from what I hear from the people I've been talking to, is that it's from WhatsApp shares or from private sharing, because that way people think that they're more likely to think that it's yours, that you're taking it firsthand, as opposed to just something you're posting on the internet. For some reason, that actually builds, I hate to say build trust, but it is, but that's how they're getting away, is by not putting it online, which is kind of counterintuitive in a way. But unfortunately, we have seen success with these, and it's not supposed to, but I guess that's just how human psychology works sometimes. Like, we're like, oh, it's not a popular picture, it's just something that I took right now, so here, I just took it for you. And people seem to suspect it less, and I hate it. It's not, it shouldn't be that way, but it is.
Yeah, that's true. Connie, you want to add on?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this morning, very funny because my friend actually sent me a video this morning, of an eagle like going up to a dog and its owner and leading them to like a place to its friend and then trying to get them to rescue his friend, like the eagle. And even when I watched it, I was kind of like, is this for real? Like, that's adorable, you know? And then I read the comments, and some people were mentioning how they noticed glitches in the video. So, like with certain AI generated images, I think there are certain things that you can kind of try to spot. But even for me, and I think with a lot of animal NGOs, we're very new to the AI technology, right? So, I mean, even this year, we had the AFA conference here in Taipei, and we had a session just talking about AI and technology and how it can help the animal protection movement. So I think us as advocates, we need to be, I think, trained, especially for in the field of AI moving forward, I think.
Thank you. Vinaya, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Yes, I just want to add that actually we have been discussing about this, about AI generated content. When we compared the content that we've seen this year and last year, it has been very different. They have been very advancing their technique. I once saw a giraffe, I think, being picked up by like a tractor or something, which is very weird. But like I feel like they learn more now because they're doing this content where we can't really see the difference. And the scenario that they're using, it looks normal, it looks empathizing. Um, I think yesterday as well, one of the audience actually commented maybe it is better to have fake generated content rather than having the real rescue content. But like the impact is that people are going to learn, you know. So this is a very new field that SMACC is actually wants to pursue as well. It's very complex, and we need to know the impact on real cruelty content.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's still a new emerging one, but we will catch up very soon on this as well. Okay, I have another question here. I think this might be relevant to quite a few organizations, whether, challenges in terms of being a small organization and how they can contribute and investigate. Sorry, somehow the question disappeared. I'm just looking at the list of questions. So there's a question about how investigations are exciting and people really want to see animals being rescued, but it is very difficult in reality. And so how can we prioritize and target the issues in any other ways? Maybe Connie and Adam can comment.
Well, I think, like with the cases that we get reported here in Taiwan, I must say, people who report them, they help us tremendously. Like, don't be like one individual, you can do so much. We've had people, collect evidence for us, and they sort of look through the videos in detail and they kind of link to different pages and they try, they're able to find like names of these these people, So like I think even if you're an individual and not part of an NGO, there are so many things that you could still be doing. So that's one example. Another example is I think just like spreading the message to people around you. I think that's very important. A lot of NGOs, we do public awareness campaigns, right? Recently, as SMACC, we sort of try to do a lot of the online videos and then get people to share them and just kind of spread the message. And maybe sometimes people think, oh, just by sharing a video, is that going to help anything? But it really does, you know? And if we get more people to do it, then more people start talking about it. And like I said, the more it is discussed in the public sphere, the more attention it will get from government and from authorities and from industry, right? I think what Adam said, mobilizing the public, right, to target even certain platforms or companies. It works very well here in Taiwan as well. So I think we just need to remember we need to be building the animal movement so it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, sometimes I think we're we're sort of preaching to animal lovers already, but I think we still have a lot of people who don't regularly maybe, read about animal issues or know about animal issues. So I think there mass campaigns and awareness, education is still very important.
Yeah.
Very true.
Oh, I
I
was
think,
just,
yeah.
yeah, I'll just add briefly that that pretty much was excellent. I don't have a lot to add to that, but I think just to I just thought one thing that was worth kind of like pointing out is that there's like, there's, you can get extremely obviously in depth in investigations, and this is what our animal crimes team does on a daily basis, right? So like they have the sort of somewhat the bandwidth, but they have a lot of a lot of things they're working on, to get a little more in depth. But there's a lot of information that's just on open source. Like you don't always have to. So open source, if you don't know the term, just means like that you can just sort of Google and find, right? And like Connie was saying, like a lot of times with these things, if you find one thing, you can kind of like link to other sites or other posts by these individuals that kind of start to build this digital trail. And a lot of our cases are built on that sort of like open source and what's publicly available. So it doesn't always have to be like a super in-depth investigation. Ideally, right? That's what we want law enforcement to do, and they have specialists in that. Unfortunately, they're not always willing, but hopefully, as Connie said, as the issue gets raised more and more, they start to understand the importance of doing that and get more involved. We've had law enforcement officers who were involved in investigating child pornography, and then started to understand this link between bestiality and child pornography, and became very, very involved in kind of cracking down and tracking these folks involved in bestiality. So I think as their awareness rises, they're much more willing to do the work.
Yeah, I think there's so much potential for synergy here as well, because again, going back to the illegal wildlife trade topic that Rebecca brought up earlier, that it took quite a few years, and also having this huge CITES element that talks about international trade before every party to the convention actually had to have a online, cybercrime investigation unit. It was proposed as a recommendation for every country to have. And I think that would be really ideal also to help the investigation teams to have that tech ability to be able to investigate, look at the data that might not be openly available to take further action. There is a comment also that Amanda shared in the chat on more tech people to do more research. I think that is also quite a valuable point. There has been some interest. For example, in Singapore, in my previous work experience, we've worked with some companies and who do hackathons for students who can do projects to do web crawling, to collect data on certain platforms that we might not have the bandwidth to go and collect data. So that was for illegal wildlife trade, but I'm sure the algorithms, the code can also capture certain elements of abuse that is more obvious. Of course, the hidden forms are going to be still a challenge for collation. That comes to a question on if we have stats on percentage of animal abuse content per platform, and does SMACC work in collaboration with Wildly? So yeah, Vinaya, if you want to share the process.
I'm sorry, I think we haven't had any communication with leaks, but we're open to any collaboration if it means that we can grow our coalition further and then raise awareness. That's for sure.
So we have another 10 minutes to go through the question answers. So there is a question for Rebecca again on how can we better promote the human-animal abuse link to governments and authorities. So we have spoken about this link a few times. I think this will be quite a useful tip for organizations.
Well, that's not an easy question, I suppose. How do you promote the animals abuse link? Well, I think firstly you have to train the people that is on the front line that it's not right. You know, if the frontline meaning authorities and vets and vet nurses and students, you know, child abuse, you have a legal duty of care to report it, right? If you're a vet, you receive a dog or cat that's clearly been abused or neglected, then should you not do something about it? Because in a sense, you know, it's a dying dog. Should we not ask them professionally to have to do it? Okay, and I think, you know, until that happens and cases are being put forward, then I don't see how to, because, you know, as this actually goes back to my first question. Like, people ask me, why do I study wildlife trafficking and not something like woman trafficking? Okay, I don't think that it is it, you know, and then my answer would be, you know, I'm not saying neither. I'm not saying they're not important. They're just as important. So I think in a sense, the government there's just too much for them to on the plate. And then if you tell them, right, hang on a minute, there's a link, you would need empirical evidence that is happening in the city to actually convince them that it's an issue.
I think it is a challenge, and it is a challenge that we are all taking up to continue pushing and engaging the government agencies in that direction. Yeah. Relating to
I could add to that,
yeah,
Ambu.
yeah.
So I think research, of course, is extremely important. I remember many years ago, I think, just seeing something in the news or media, something about that link between animal abuse and human abuse. So I was actually a bit surprised, not so surprised, a little bit, but when I approached some legislators, a few of them actually know about this. So like we need to remember that they may have seen the research, like, because it has been talked about in media, so that's really important. So they know how harmful content can affect people's behavior, right? So in Taiwan, we actually have the Child and Juvenile Welfare Protection Act, and it's aimed at protecting children, of course. It is the only law right now, currently, that requires platforms to abide with certain requirements. So currently, it mandates that if a content is reported by the authorities that is proven to be harmful to children, that the platform has the responsibility to restrict access or to remove the content, right? So, I mean, this is, I think, a window of opportunity for us because if we can get animal cruelty cases in their radar, I think they would be very helpful, right? So because of this act, our government now has a network. It's called iWin. And so it's basically a group of scholars and NGOs. And basically they are tasked with observing internet usage in children, and they have actually established a hotline where people can report, harmful content. And they work on the promotion, development of like moderating software. So I think moving forward, like if we can somehow link animal abuse more to how it harms people, especially children, I think more people will take this more seriously, I think.
I think that's a brilliant angle because most countries are more or less coming up with an act, a piece of legislation on the online criminal harm. Like in Singapore, there is an Online Criminal Harm Act, and it prohibits, it regulates the platforms to ensure that they remove graphic content that's harmful to humans. So this link that Rebecca mentioned, I think it is very important to make that link to push for a change to include animal abuse content in that as well.
If I can just add to that, add to what Connie and Rebecca just said, I agree, but I also want to say the stuff that's on the other side, not so much the legislation, but the human side of things. I see a lot, especially here in Hong Kong or in Asia, is you know how public shaming goes a long way in Asian countries. I hate to say it, but it works just as well for law enforcement. So it's not about what they are supposed to do, is what happens when they don't do what they're supposed to do. I've seen it a lot because in my day job, we work with media, we work with journalists, and just to name, there's something called Hong Kong Animal Post in Hong Kong, which is created by a bunch of journalists and people who's in media who basically quit their jobs to run it because they need to voice something and there's no channel. And they're actually pretty big in Hong Kong. So there's places like that. They're not like a really governing body, but of course they have their due diligence as journalists. And what happens is that they tell the stories not just about the animal abuse, but about when law enforcement doesn't do their job. And believe it or not, there's a lot of weight that goes into these things because to put it in very blunt terms, is not about doing what is good, it's about saving face at the end of the day. And I hate to say it, but it works. And until we find something that works, sometimes we kind of have to think in that direction. I mean, is it the most ideal? Probably not. But until we find something better, sometimes that is also a way to get things started. And I think with a lot of law enforcement, they do want to do something, or sometimes they're just oblivious, or sometimes they're just ignorant in that department. But to bring that awareness, to bring other people, and of course, to all the voices on board when you contact journalists and media like that, it does solve the problem in a lot of the cases.
Yeah, definitely. We do have quite a few other questions. There are questions and comments in the group as well, on the chat room as well, on collecting information from the deep and the dark web, and also whether we should be continuing to collect cruelty links on an ongoing basis, that organizations like us would find helpful as an evidence, or potentially doing the platform's job for them. Shouldn't they be reporting their data? So there's quite a few interesting questions. And I would really wanted to have a closing one, but I think all the speakers have given such valuable insights and inputs and ideas for all the participants who are listening in, for something for us to take away, bring back, and take action in our own ways, whether it's creating awareness or working with the different stakeholders as well. So thank you so much to all the speakers.
So I want to just ask, as I did yesterday, for your feedback. You did give great comments in the chat, which we've collected and will inform what we do next. But please, can you give some feedback specifically about this event? You can just scan the QR code, and I think a link is going in the chat right now, and it helps us improve these going forward. Next slide, please. I want to say a big thank you to our funders who have made this event possible today and are also funding our event taking place next year. We are a charity. SMACC and AFA are one big charity, and we rely heavily on our members to support the work that we're doing. And we really appreciate Humane World for Animals, Lady Freethinker, RSPCA, and WTG for funding this event. Next slide, please. And as I say, we are a charity. And one thing that's really clear today, I know many of you are charities in the room as well, but one thing that was clear today is there's so many more areas of this issue that we really need to dig deep into that we're not able to get to just now. So we're always looking for ways to expand our team and the time that we have to work on this. So if you can make a donation, then please do visit our website where you can do that right now. Next slide, please. And just a reminder, I think we've really drilled it home, but we're so excited. If you liked this event this year, it would be fantastic to have you joining us in person next year in Bali, Indonesia on June 18 to 20. We're going to be able to have more room, more space to dig into these issues, to hear more from our experts. We're really hoping to get platforms there on maybe some of the panels with us, and other tech industry and government representatives to build those stakeholders and get them together, as we said was our aim for the summit. We have the webpage available for the summit. Thank you. And there's information on there which will be updated in due course. The registration isn't open yet, but it will be shortly. And we'll also be putting up some information about discounts for the hotel where the event is taking place. We may even have a online option if you really can't make it in person, but there is so much value to us all getting together in the same space. So I do hope you can make it if you can. If you want to, you can join the AFA mailing list and we'll be able to update you with more details about the summit once they're ready. The link is also on this slide. Okay. That is all for this year's summit, for the very first SMACC summit. That's taken a lot to get here. We had it planned to happen in person. We had lots of obstacles in the way, and I'm so grateful to our team, to all the speakers that adapted, and people that registered to join an in-person version and have now come together for this. So we could make something that I think has been super, super valuable and a really important step in this next stage of this campaign to help animals. So thank you so much again, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, whatever it might be where you are now. Thank you very much.